Paris Fashion Week reliably produces images that seize global attention. When Kylie Jenner arrived at a Schiaparelli show wearing a hyper-realistic, life-sized taxidermy lion head attached to a black velvet gown, it generated millions of social media mentions and frantic commentary across every major digital platform. Yet behind this theatrical excess operates some of the most disciplined financial structures in the world. Conglomerates like LVMH and privately held giants like Chanel generate tens of billions of euros annually through rigorous supply chain management and highly calculated global retail strategies. In the middle of this corporate machinery sits a division spending millions of euros to dress just 4,000 people. To a conventional accountant, the couture balance sheet is a disaster. It operates as an intentional commercial loss leader, sanctioned and funded by the exact same executives who ruthlessly optimize every other aspect of their sprawling portfolios. The existence of this anomaly becomes clearer when we examine the environment that created it. By the mid-19th century, Paris was rapidly industrializing, and an emerging class of wealthy patrons demanded clothing that separated them from mass production. An English designer named Charles Frederick Worth capitalized on this demand in 1858 by establishing strict parameters for what he called haute couture. He required that every garment be custom-fitted to the individual wearer and constructed entirely by hand. The resulting pieces were exceptionally intricate, utilizing rare materials and highly specialized sewing techniques to satisfy an aristocratic clientele that expected total exclusivity. Executing these designs required an ecosystem of localized workshops known as the métier d'art. These small, independent ateliers dedicated themselves entirely to singular crafts, spending generations mastering distinct techniques in embroidery, pleating, and featherwork. Operating a bespoke, localized supply chain built on thousands of hours of manual labor served the economy of 19th-century European royalty. Maintaining that exact same labor-intensive model in a 21st-century era of globalized mass manufacturing defies standard economic logic, unless that inefficiency is serving a highly specific strategic purpose. By the late 1960s, the traditional aristocratic client base had largely dissolved. Post-war cultural attitudes toward wealth display shifted, and a younger generation rejected the rigid formality of bespoke salon fittings in favor of immediate, accessible fashion. The industry responded by democratizing. In 1966, Yves Saint Laurent launched Rive Gauche, taking the aesthetic authority of his name and applying it to ready-to-wear garments sold directly off the rack on the left bank of Paris. Production shifted toward factories, sizing became standardized, and the specialized Parisian ateliers began closing. The consensus across the industry at the time was clear. The bespoke model was an economic dinosaur, facing inevitable extinction. It survived because the corporate owners of these fashion houses recognized they could alter its function. Rather than relying on bespoke dresses as a primary source of direct revenue, they repositioned the entire operation as a strategic apparatus designed to keep the broader brand alive. We can see how this apparatus functions through a model known as the Kapfer luxury pyramid, which visually maps the commercial architecture of modern fashion conglomerates. At the massive base of this structure sit accessible entry point products, cosmetics, fragrances, and eyewear. A €100 bottle of perfume or €40 lipstick generates the vast majority of a corporate conglomerate's actual transaction volume and immediate profit. Moving up the structure, we find ready-to-wear clothing and leather goods. Here, the relationship inverses. Production volume strictly decreases, while the price point for a single handbag or tailored jacket climbs into the thousands. At the very top sits haute couture. This apex product does not need to cover its own costs or achieve commercial viability. Its sole purpose is to establish an extreme ceiling of artistry and expense. This positions the brand as something rare and highly aspirational, which then legitimizes the steep profit margins applied to the millions of lipsticks and fragrances sold at the bottom. Beyond justifying price points, a dedicated couture division returns investment as a rigorous laboratory for creative research and development. Designers test complex silhouettes, extreme proportions, and novel fabric treatments in a bespoke setting before those ideas are filtered down and scaled for commercial ready-to-wear collections. It also serves to secure the brand's supply chain. In recent decades, conglomerates like Chanel have actively purchased dozens of historic métiers d'art, the specialized independent workshops, often simply to ensure centuries-old techniques do not disappear. The knowledge held by these artisans is tacit and physical. It takes decades of apprenticeship to master the needlework and material handling required at this level, representing an embodied human asset that cannot be digitized or replicated by an automated factory. This commitment to extreme craftsmanship yields a sociological asset known as cultural capital. By preserving historical techniques and pushing the boundaries of physical art, a clothing label elevates itself into the role of a curatorial institution. When a brand accumulates enough of this cultural weight, it claims a status closer to an architectural landmark or a national museum. This insulates the company from the volatile boom and bust cycle of seasonal fashion trends. Today, however, that permanent relevance is tested by an increasingly fragmented media landscape. It raises the question of whether the fleeting spectacle of a viral fashion show actually builds long-term equity. Generating 50 million views across global social platforms from users reacting with bewilderment rather than aspiration does not reliably translate into luxury sales. Meanwhile, actual ultra-high net worth clients are displaying a growing demand for absolute provenance. When consumers are asked to pay 20,000 euros for a garment, they want verifiable proof of quiet luxury and physical craftsmanship. A working couture division answers that demand perfectly. It stands as undeniable institutional proof of a brand's technical excellence, providing the exact justification needed for why the label's commercial products command such astronomical prices. There is one final audience for this display of extreme instance, sitting far outside the Paris ateliers, the broader financial markets. Sustaining a massive, heavily staffed division that loses money year after year sends a clear signal to global investors that the parent conglomerate is financially secure enough to play a multi-decade game. It proves executive leadership is actively funding long-term heritage, refusing to liquidate brand prestige to hit short-term quarterly earnings targets. This dynamic sits at the core of the anti-laws of luxury, a business strategy that deliberately ignores immediate volume and manufacturing efficiency to optimize entirely for prestige, legacy, and artificial scarcity. Haute couture functions as an irreplaceable corporate engine of desire. It represents the exact financial cost required to manufacture perceived value at a global scale, converting extreme inefficiency into the brand's most powerful strategic asset.